So Karyn Wagner, the first season of Underground was pretty successful, to say the least. What was the attitude going into the second season?
Let's do it again and make it even better.
Well, the show really struck a chord with audiences. Why do you think it had such a tremendous impact on people in its first season and continues to in its second?
I think one of the most important ways that this show is successful is that the characters are all self-determining, that everybody is taking responsibility for their life and their history and making the most successful venture of that they can, if that makes sense. So people are they're seizing their own destinies, I think, is the point I want to make. Everybody's really trying to seize their own destiny. The storylines are all very strong, and the characters are all very strong, and there's very little wavering, and I think it's great for audiences to see people of action. I think that it's such a timely show for the particular season of man that we're living through, where people can be made to feel powerless by whatever social issues there are going on, which I could go into endlessly. But that people see people in another time living by their own, living from their heart and doing what they know has heart and soul and has meaning for them. So whether it's an abolitionist or an escaped enslaved person, everybody is working hard for what they want. They're not waiting for anybody to come rescue them or tell them what to believe or feel or think. They're just seizing the day, if you will. They're seizing their own destiny. And that's wonderful to watch, and it's fantastic. Every episode we get a new script, and you read that and you're like, yes, go do it. Yes, that's excellent. So it's really exciting to be a part of it.
It's also very bold and innovative in its storytelling. I mean, it's not a very stuffy period drama. It's
No,
more of
not
an
at all.
adventure story. How does that affect your work as the costume designer?
It gives me some fantastic leeway to push the envelope a little bit. I think that the thing that really leads the way in this series is the writing, which is, which certainly nods to the period, but is very contemporary and speaks a very current truth. And then the music picks up where that left off, and you have these fantastic music choices, and you're like, okay, so I can push this. It doesn't have to be a stuffy sepia toned costume situation. I can insert color, I can invoke other cultures, I can really I can seize what might have been rather than what we know was proved to have been. I can seize that little tiny in between space where, like, that side's impossible, that side we know existed because we've seen it in old photographs, and then there's this little tiny place in the middle that you can say, well, it could be true.
Right. One of the major additions this season is the character of Harriet Tubman.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about designing her costumes. How did you start?
I started by finding what few photographs I could of Harriet. There's maybe 4 or 5 extant photographs of her at all, and very few and maybe 1 or 2 from our time period. And from there, I read some of what she'd written. Obviously, of course, I talked to the showrunners about the vision they were looking for. And then when I found out who had been cast, that kind of helped settle everything. I kind of designed from my gut, so it's not a logical process necessarily. I start here and sort of end up over there somewhere. And when I realized it was going to be Aisha, she's such a strong, wonderful woman to begin with, that I really designed for her as well as representing Harriet Tubman. So it was this huge honor and this huge responsibility and this huge excitement all at the same time.
Right, and your clothing really does inform the characters in this show, as it always should. You're welcome. Can you talk a little bit about more in-depth working with the actors, other designers to come up with that look for the show and for the characters?
For the actors are amazingly open and very trusting, especially in a second season. So it's been there's dialogue, of course. There's always, well, this or that or that, but I think what I the people that I really worked very closely with, besides Anthony Hemingway and Misha Green and Joe Pekaski, is I worked very closely with the production designer and also the set decorator and the prop master. And the four of us were sort of these four musketeers saying, okay, I'm using this location that's got this beautiful, it's got this beautiful patina, or it's this style of building. And then I was able to inform my designs based on the information I was given. So it was really more about encapsulating each character in a particular setting. So it was their surroundings and their costume and their horse and buggy and their props, and it all has to work together, because the minute it doesn't, it becomes very distracting for the audience. So it's a big circle.
Right. What were some of the other major changes that happened in this season? With character development, or the little jump in time that you had, what were some of the other major changes for you?
Well, one of the big things that we now know about this season is that I was hiding Journey's pregnancy for the first few episodes. So that was the subject of much discussion and several different versions of original designs, trying to figure out what men's draping clothing would help us the best. And something that started in season 1 that became much more evident in season 2 was the concept of hiding in plain sight. So while we were using men's clothing to hide Journey's pregnancy, it also spoke to something that was very common in those days, which is that you might dress a part and you weren't necessarily that person. But it's difficult to describe, for instance, a runaway slave. And so people are looking for something specific they might have read on a handbill, but there's no photograph to go with that. So it's not like today where you can Google, escaped somebody or other. Oh, okay, I know who that is. You're using your imagination. So when you see what looks like a young man, driving a cart with maybe his enslaved person sitting next to him, you take it sort of at face value. So there was a lot of, that was a big change, or not a big change, but I guess a development from last season. And then I have to say that I pushed the envelope a lot further this year than I did taking chances with design, which was a lot of fun.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that, the chances that you took in design. What were some specifics?
I played a lot with silhouette. I tried to keep to the basic antebellum silhouette, but I played with necklines and I played with fabrics. For instance, going into Ernestine's story, let's go there. There's very little remaining proof or pictures or material of the enslaved Gullah Geechee. So I extrapolated pretty freely from the cultures that I knew they had come from. So I took the contemporary Dutch wax prints and all of that and infused them and made this very colorful society that we have no idea if that existed back then, but I wanted to make it very separate from the enslaved plantation of Macon from last year. I wanted people to totally know they were in a different place. So that's one example of something that I did where I just sort of pushed in and played.
Yeah, that storyline in particular really delves into expressionism, not just in terms of costumes, but in terms of set design as well, and all the camera setup. So it is very, very bold. You basically have to make a lot of this from scratch, right?
Pretty much all of it, yeah.
And
Yeah.
do it on a TV budget and schedule as well. So
Yeah.
what are some of the complications of that?
Well, we had this rack set to the side. We had a lot of complications, especially in terms of weather. We seem to always be shooting in places where it's raining, or we have what do we had? We had a hurricane in Savannah, and we had to evacuate the city. So there was this rack off to one side in the workroom, and it was like all the things we'd started and then had to momentarily abandon to try and make something that was now next up because the schedule had flipped. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, my crew was just amazing. I bless them and thank them every day, because without them, I would not have been able to do it. I had a whole almost separate department of people who were just fitting extras, because I could barely have a chance to wander back there and say, I want this, I want this. They'd just come to me every morning and say, okay, we're dressing this today. Do you have any ideas? And I'd show them a photograph, or I'd say, well, and I want this, 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 and that. And off they'd go and they'd make it happen. So it was a lot of it was a lot of elasticity on the part of my crew and of the entire crew, especially, again, the production designer and then the set decorator, to try and address these things that just cropped up. So all I can really say is that we just kind of were like on our feet all the time, just, trying to figure out where the next wave was coming from.
Right. There is a lot of scale and scope to this show, very almost like a feature film, and it's pretty indicative of where television has come to in the last decade, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and that's very exciting to be a part of, because I've always loved working on features because of their scan and because of their scope, and because you can really do the thing that I'm getting to do on Underground, which is create very specific groups of people with very specific color palettes, very specific fabric choices within that palette, and textures, and knowing a little bit about the way lighting works and how light is going to hit the fabric, and jewelry or lack of jewelry. So it's very exciting to be able to create all these little separate worlds. The abolitionists over here, the Gullah Geechee over here, Macon Plantation over here, all very specifically different. So that's the great. It's sometimes a little frustrating because you are making a feature on a television schedule, but at the same time, the challenge is great because it keeps you awake, and it keeps your mind very active. So you're always like waking up with an idea. Like even when you're sleeping, your mind is still going. So you wake up with these crazy ideas, and you're like, that was pretty crazy, but it could work.
So I know that season 1 is still airing right now. A couple more episodes to go. Have you already started work on season 3, or have you gotten any scripts for that yet?
I haven't. I don't even know if season 3 has been greenlit by the studio. So I guess we're in a wait and see pattern.
Well, knock on wood.
Yeah.
Karyn Wagner, thank you so much, and congratulations on season 2 of Underground. It was a pleasure talking with you again.
Oh, thank you, and a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.